Hi there, my name is Brittany Johnson. I'm a student at Carleton College, and today I'm going to be showing you some tricks and techniques I've picked up to create 3D models using photogrammetry in Agisoft Photoscan. I'd like to show you just my typical workflow. I am by no means an expert yet, and I'm still learning some of the best practice items for doing this kind of work. First things first, what we're going to do is we're going to start by adding a chunk. And once we're in our chunk, we're going to add photos. I've already taken and separated out the photos we're going to be using today of a brachioconglomerate, a type of fossil rock from the Dana Minerals collection that Carleton College's geology department uses. So you can see down here the photos have imported. They are waiting. We're going to go back up to here, back into workflow, and we're going to align photos. I'm going to keep it on medium and generic just because my computer doesn't have crazy processing power, and I'd like to get through this as quickly as is reasonable. Some things we're going to watch out for are going to be some photos in here that I don't think are going to properly align on the first try, so we're actually going to do those ourselves using markers. First things first though, we're going to let this process and get settled in, which luckily you won't have to wait for. Alright, we're back and we have gotten our sparse point cloud based on our photo alignment. Clicking this camera button on the top toolbar here will toggle the assumed positions that the program will make itself for where it thinks you were positioned, focused, blah 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 when you took the picture. You can see here that there are two main rings. Unfortunately, I do actually have a third ring down here. This is where the markers are going to come in because the program is having a little bit of trouble reading and referencing these photos against the other sets that I have. So we're actually going to be manually aligning these photos by setting markers on our grid and pieces of the rock. I personally like to keep a little notepad next to me here when I'm working on my points to help reference them. Actually, this isn't too bad for just having the two rings of photos, but it can be better and we can fill in some of these gaps on the side if we use our photos here now. Now, my preference is always to start with blue and orange because it's the left one on the side number 1 here. But what I'm gonna do is start on the outside of blue. I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna create marker, and that's gonna be 1. So on my little notepad I have sitting next to me, I'm gonna write 0.1 blue outside. Now I've done this enough times that I kind of just remember and know where all of my markers are going to be. But if you're maybe doing this for the first time, I highly recommend that you keep a notepad and you don't have to go fast. Just keep an eye on what you're doing, where you're doing it. Create marker. You want at least 4 points on each of these photos, and you'll go back to one of your photos that has matched when you're done setting them on your unmatched photo, and you will align 1, 2, 3, 4 on the photos up here too. So I'll go in and I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4. But I like to do that in the end so I can do them all in one fell swoop. You want at least 4 points per photo, I think I mentioned that, but I like to do a few more and I like to make sure I get ones that are at varying depths, because if I'm only doing photos that are down here on the bottom, points on the photos that are down here on the bottom, you're only really getting a 2D representation of what is actually going on in this photo. And because I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, I actually want to jump over to another photo that's got my other color here. And I want to put 5 and 6 on here just to keep it even and in order. That's important. Generally, I look for items that are also good to make markers on, like decimal points. If you're working with something that has labels, decimal points are another excellent piece to label. We don't have a decimal point, but I can tell a really good one is going to be the bottom of this 7. So I'm going to make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is behind the rock. So 7 and 8 are going to be this one here. 7 and I already put down 7 and 8. Fun fact, you can just remove these really easily by right-clicking on them. When you want to put a one in that you've already created, just moments earlier in fact, what you do is right-click, place marker, and put down the next point. Then I want my bottom of my 7 to be another point. That'll be point 10. So now I'm just going to go through these photos and I'm going to assign these points to all of the squares. Nobody wants to see me do that for an hour, so I will pause the tutorial here and fast forward through doing that. If anyone at home is thinking, wow, this part looks really tedious, I'm not gonna lie to you, it kind of is, but it's necessary if your points haven't aligned the way you want them to, and it's especially important if you've got photos like these that will provide more data. It's just a matter of getting the program to reference and read them correctly. And that's why I have Spotify running in the background. Normally when this program is running and trying to do something, you don't want to be running other programs in the background. I would say not even Chrome, just because you want that extra memory and that extra processing power to be going to this program. It'll speed it up a ton and you'll thank me later. But for now, when you're just assigning points, it's perfectly alright to have a bit of music or a video going in the background, and I kind of recommend it. Otherwise, you just start getting lost in an endless ocean of pixels and markers. A couple other things I would like to point out is that you can name markers. So if you wanted to be naming these like red outside square or red green intersect, whatever, you could do that if you wanted to. I am fine just using the point names because I've kind of got a system: odds on the outside, evens on the inside, goes in pairs, blah blah blah. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then everything, I kind of usually skip 9 and then points after 10 are what I use to mark special places on whatever I'm modeling as far as height goes. Also save often, because putting in these points is mostly just tedious work that takes a long time, and I don't want you to lose that, so please remember to save. Alright, so I've gone through now and I've added the bulk of the points we're going to be using. You can see them here rotating with it. I still would like to add a couple more just so I know 100% for sure that it's going to see depth and things correctly. So I'm just gonna take a look up on the ones that I know worked and see if there's any kind of points that stand out to me that might make a good area to put a marker. Generally things that have a little bit of an identifying feature work well. If there's any points on the object where things kind of come to a tip or miscolorations, I actually am not seeing a whole lot on this rock, which is probably why the program was having a hard time building the sparse cloud to begin with. Alright, I'm going to make a marker in this rusty spot here. At the top of the rusty spot right here, I'm going to set a marker then on some of the photos down here. And it is on the between blue and red green. So we can just come down here between blue and red green. There it is. I'm going to put marker 11 here new marker. And we're just gonna jump onto the photos next to this one and put marker 11 in about the same place. And this just helps me feel more confident that the program will create an accurate representation of the new photos I'm trying to put in. You want to have things at various depths, heights, just to make sure that it builds a nice picture. Definitely get it from a couple different angles if you can. I think we'll be able to get it on a few from the beginning too. Yep, here we go. So now the really fun part is we go back up to some of the pictures that did align when we put the program in initially, and we need to set the markers we've set onto these photos. So I'm gonna zoom in on my blue square. I'm gonna say place marker 1, place marker 2. I'm gonna do this around the entire board for the ones I established on my unaligned photos at the bottom. Here's another helpful little reminder, just make sure you're saving while you do this. You want to have your unaligned reference markers referenced on at least 2 photos that are aligned. So now you'll notice when I went to this one, I got these red guide lines, and this is just Agisoft letting me know that they have kind of an idea where they think I'm going to be putting my second round of points. And as usual, they're pretty spot on here. So now I'm just gonna add these in. You'll notice I haven't put my side ones on yet. That's because I feel like I can't quite see them from this angle. So my little rusty spot and my bottom of the 7, I'm going to put on using a different set of photos. Again, I just feel like that'll help me get a more accurate representation when I align these photos in and rebuild my sparse cloud. You can barely see the bottom of the 7. So I'm going to go to my kind of lower angle photo, and you'll notice now that I've added references for these points onto 2 other photos, they've automatically put themselves in here, and for the most part, they're looking pretty good. So I just need to jump in here and say, this is where point 10 is, and I'll jump into another one and I'll say, yep, this is where point 10 is. Point 11 was between 1, 2, and 7 and 8, so I need to go back a little ways, or forward, as the case may be. Yep, and there's my rest spot. So now I'll just pop in and say 11 is here in the upper arch, and it's got a good idea again for me. So now everything is photo referenced, and if I look at the model, I'm going to see these points referenced on the model. So unfortunately our program did crash, so I've got to catch us up a little bit, but because we are remembering to save often, we're not too terribly far behind, and I'm going to be able to get us caught up in just a minute here. And so now you'll notice when we move over to the model, which is hiding down here, the points we've put on the photos have now aligned onto the model itself. So, put you back where I want you. There we go. The ones down here are aligned, and you can see why I said we should do some ones on the height here, just because if all of our points are on the sheet, then it kind of gives us a very flat set of references here. So now we're just gonna jump back over to our photos, and you'll know the ones that aren't aligned because they don't have the same green check mark. This check mark here on the side shows that it is aligned and is part of this map that is formed up here on your model. That one's pink because I have it selected down here. So we want to go down to all of the ones that don't have check marks, and we're going to right click, we're going to go up our little menu, and we're going to say align selected cameras. Now they've already aligned themselves to the photos, so all that's left is for them to align themselves to your model and to pull out some sparse cloud data from your photos. Again, they're pink because these are the ones we've selected. And in general, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Everything is in a circle, which is what I was able to do. A couple of overlapping ones, which I did. Let's get into the model itself. I'm going to toggle off our cameras. Push you up here. I need to rotate you around, so you got to go back over here. Excellent. And you can see that there is like some more scattering of data that's off to the side here, but it's not too terribly bad. That can happen, especially when you're aligning photos yourself, because you're not quite as precise as the computer is. But in general, I think we filled a lot of holes by adding these other photos. So now what I want to do is just kind of a best practice thing. I just want to do some gradual selection. But I want reconstructed uncertainty. I'm just looking for a point where some of these outside ones are going to come off. Not all of them. That's probably an appropriate level for now. I'm going to say that. You can see these points that are kind of this mauve reddish color are the points that it doesn't believe are accurate. Sometimes when you align photos like this on your model, you can see kind of an overlap in areas where things haven't aligned perfectly, but you're more likely to see that in the dense cloud. So anyways, I'm gonna delete these ones, and then I'm going to go up to workflow, and time for everybody's favorite part, the dense cloud. And this one's gonna take me a much longer time to process. I'm gonna leave it on medium quality because there's a lot of detail on the top and I'd like to keep that. If I had more time, I would run this in high quality, but today we're just gonna be satisfied with medium. So we're gonna give that a go. I'm leaving the defaults on. This is probably going to load photos really quickly, and then the rest of it will probably take half an hour or more, so I think I'll go get dinner. And if you're doing this at home, I advise you take a break, stretch, write a novel, do your homework for your other class. Try not to run things in the background on this computer because it's going to impact how fast it's able to process, and we want this to be working as efficiently as possible. So, for those of you watching the video, this is going to be fast forwarded, and I'll see you in a minute. Alright, so we finished processing our dense cloud out of our newly aligned photos from the bottom here, and if you go to the top, you see this multicolored collection of 9 squares. Click on that to activate your dense cloud, and as you can see, it's starting to look a lot more like the 3D image we want. And thanks to the extras we put in using down here, it's a lot more full on the sides than it would be if we were just using higher angles. That's why I like to make sure to get some lower shots like that, even though they don't always map automatically. So from here, I'm going to duplicate this process we just did, aligning photos, turning them to a sparse cloud and then to a dense cloud. I'm going to do that with another chunk that'll be the bottom of this block. And then I'll show you how to merge them so that you have one single 3D model of this rock. No base, no hole in the bottom, just a solid rock. Alrighty, the photos from chunk 2 have finished aligning now, as you can see, but unfortunately we've run into the same problem we ran into with chunk 1, where our side profile images didn't correctly align like our top angle images. So we're going to go through that same process of assigning markers in order to bring those into the same alignment as these other ones. I'm not going to walk you through that process again. If you are interested, just go back, rewatch that from chunk 1. I promise I'm doing the same thing, and I'll talk to you again when I have the density cloud from chunk 2 ready to merge. Alright, so if we want to set this up to be able to align and merge properly with the other one, you'll notice I've made some more duplications over here. That's just so that I know we have things, so if I screw this one up, we can just jump on to the next one and not have too many worries. We want to merge chunk 1 copy and chunk 2 copy over here. To do that, we're going to get rid of this messy base they're sitting on by using our friends up here, the selection tool. At this point, I don't really need the pictures, so I'm just gonna, I'm actually just gonna close that so I can work in this space. You just kind of want to make sure you're looking at the base head on, get it as flat as you can. And then for this part, I usually like using the square tool for my selector, just so I can pop up here, grab that, take a look. Alright, I missed a few, but I can clean them up pretty easily, so edit, delete section, then I can come back in, scoop out these guys pretty easily. This polygon tool looks like it's fancy, but it's a normal polygon tool. You just have to draw the circle where you want it. Edit, delete, edit, oop, missed a bit, delete. And I'll probably shave off just another small layer underneath just to make sure I've cleaned it up. So we're gonna take another peek. Yeah, I'm not quite liking all the junk that's over here, so I'm just gonna take another sliver off the bottom. We have plenty of overlap with our other chunks, so I'm not too worried about it. Just gonna boop on in like this. And edit, delete. So we're over here, we're gonna go into our copy of chunk 1. And this one's a bit messier, but should be able to clean it up just as easily. Oops, I want my selector mover. Jump back into our rectangle. Bring that up. Edit, delete. Looks pretty good, looks like 2 halves of a whole. That's a little bit gross underneath there, but let's see if I can rotate it properly to get at it. We'll just use this one to kind of slip in there and clean a bunch of it out. Don't be afraid to reposition the model to clear it out. You just do what you gotta do. Edit, delete. And I'm gonna turn markers off at this point. We're not using these ones. Awesome. Okay, so now that we've kind of cleaned up the bottom, all we have is 2 halves of the same rock. Well, you can see we have our tag there, and our tag is somewhere on this one. There. It's the same rock, I promise. We have the 2 halves. We're just gonna pop on into workflow, align chunks. We want to align copy of 1 and 2. Point based, 65 is good. And we'll let this run this process for a couple minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll see if we were successful or not. Alright, so we've just finished aligning pieces through our workflow menu, and now we're going to give a try to merging our 2 chunks. We're not merging these guys up here, we're just merging the copy ofs, and we're merging our density clouds. And yikes, that doesn't look like what we want. That looks like we've combined both of them onto the same plane without trying to flip them. Let's see here. Can we look underneath? Yep. So we have not correctly merged these 2, which means we're going to have to set up some markers and tell the program which pieces of the rocks correspond so that it can try to build it a little bit better, hopefully giving us an actual 3D model instead of 2 boxes like this stacked into each other. So we're going to have to set up markers now on our model in order to try and fix what the program isn't quite reading correctly. I'm going to want to do this by setting points on the model, but first I want to clear all markers. So I'm just going to go through here and delete all of these. We should be good now to actually start on our markers, and I find that on something like this, our number tag is probably going to be a pretty safe place to start. I've gone into View, Panes, Photos to open up my Photos pane again, just making sure all my markers are gone. They are, and that's good because now I'm going to restart markers, but I'm going to look for ones that I think are going to be on both images. So I'm going to start here. 1 is going to be the bottom of the 7, or we're going to start with 10. I must have forgotten a 9 somewhere. Oops. I must have forgotten a 9 somewhere. So I think we're just gonna start with 10. 11. I'm gonna go 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's our first place to start. We're going to jump onto another photo over here. Photos pane, please. And we're just gonna pop the same thing we did earlier. Yep, place 10. So those two are now together. We'll be able to see those on the model. Good, good. Now we're gonna go up to chunk 1, and we also need to delete these ones real quick. So we're just gonna, can I just clear all markers from here? Let me just zoom in on these guys, click them, remove them. Gonna double check down here. I don't see any of the little flag marker icons, so we should have them all cleared from here. And then I'm gonna look for our favorite number tag again. There we go. And I'm just gonna cross-reference back on 2 real quick. Make sure I put the right number in the right place. (10, 11, 12, 13). We're going to rename it 10, but we're actually going to want it at the bottom of the 7, 11, 12, 13. That should match up with what we've got here. 10, 11, 12, 13. 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh, let's double do that. 10. Alright, and I'm gonna look for a couple other places now on the sides, probably some kind of distinctive marking. Earlier we did use this rust spot, but I don't think it's going to show up very well on our other side. So I'm looking for something else. Don't like the way these moved. Just gonna try to move them. Is gonna be somewhere more over here. So I can see some problems with how our mapping is going already. The program will probably be able to fix any small changes like that, but it's still worth it to try to be as accurate as we can. Tell you what, I'm going to go for the opposite side at the very tip of this white point in the rock. I think it's this white spot here. So I'm gonna put 14 there. 14 also comes with some rust spots, but I think they're gonna be too low on the other side, so I'm gonna skip them in favor of looking for something a bit more middle-ish. Put our 14 in. Excellent. See, now if I as a human am having trouble identifying really good patterns to use, that just makes more sense as to why the program itself is not having a super easy time creating. I think we're gonna have to go for a lower angle to find this one. So this, I think, should be enough of a reference for the program now to be able to try and align these on its own. So we're gonna go back into align. We're doing our copy ofs, but this time we're doing a marker-based alignment instead of trying to get the program to figure it out itself. So we're just gonna click marker-based and click OK, and you'll notice it's much faster. So then we're going to go back into our workflow. We're going to go into align now that we've merged. Merge our dense clouds. Again, much faster. And our merge chunk looks a lot better, doesn't it? It's not quite in the middle here, but we're working on it. Look at that. Much better. There's some overlap of the rough edges. That's to be expected, but you'll notice it's an actual 3D model now. If we take a look at our sparse density cloud, we can see the overlap from where both pieces rested on the paper, but we of course deleted that out of our dense models, so now we just are left with this. And there's a lot of cleaning up to do around the edges. You can see here there's a lot of weird knobby bits that I'm sure will give us problems if I don't touch them and try to mesh with them there. So I'm going to take a minute and clean those up before we try to build our mesh. So just 1 second. Alright, so unfortunately the program did hang up a bit, so I've had to reset our markers. I'm now working from these titled markered chunk 1, markered chunk 2 to keep them straight. And now I've just gone back to merging these density clouds and trying to clean up some of these edges here where things got a little bit funky. Like I said, that's why we save often. Luckily, because I'd been saving, I didn't lose too much work. Really just about 2 minutes of work. So we're just going to go around these corners and clean this up to the best of our ability. And then we'll take a look at the actual mesh. And using the mesh, we'll be able to identify some of our problem areas. This particular model has been a little bit more difficult for me because of the nature of the sign, and some of the pictures I took weren't the best. So it's been having a little bit of a trouble setting up the sides, and sometimes you can see some of that in overlap. like for here for instance, you can see a tiny bit of overlap in these points in this dark region, and that just shows you where the density clouds aren't fully aligned. But luckily, just by going through editing, we can take out some of the extra points if we don't want them. Otherwise, the program will just use where the density is the highest and build the mesh based on that. Alright, so as an example of what I mean by overlap, our mesh has finished processing, and I'm going to flip over from our dense cloud to our wireframe. And you can see here at the bottom there's these little kind of horns hanging on the side. You can see there's some stray little islands. There's some on the inside. Mainly what I want to eliminate is pieces like this in the corner here. Anything on top. Things are a little bit rough over here, and this I can see. And we're just going to do that by going through and gently editing our density cloud. So let's see, I'm going to rotate this. Your density cloud will match the same rotation as your wireframe, so I highly suggest using that to match where you want to be. Then I'm just going to grab into my freehand tool and snip alongside the edge of the model. Alright, so I've made our new mesh, and it's looking pretty good to me. This is obviously not going to be a perfect one, and I don't think it's as good as the other ones I've made, but considering the amount of troubles I had, my experience, and the somewhat poor quality of the photos I was able to take that morning, I'm pretty happy with this mesh. I think there are a couple spots where it's a little rough, so I'm just going to go into Tools. We're going to go down to Mesh. I want to smooth the mesh. Just one pass for now. I don't want to lose too much of this detail on the top. This works. There were a lot of striations on the rock, so I think this looks about right. At any rate, I'm happy with it, and I'm ready to build a texture. So we've got this handsome mesh, we've done all this work, time to go back into our workflow menu, and we're just going to go right to build texture. Generally your defaults work fine. The texture size is a little large for some online hosts, but you can usually share these files pretty easily using Google Drive or whatever your preferred file storage format is. I'll come back to you in just a second when our texture is done and we can talk about our final results. Alright, well now our texture has been made and we can access it by going up to our texture pyramid at the top. It's the one with the little tree and sun and sky, and we click that and boom, there it is. A beautiful texture for our beautiful 3D model. I've got some texture projection errors here that I'm not too happy about. This one looks like it came in off of our grid that we originally had the rocks sitting on. So I'll probably go back off camera and fix these little spots. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with what we've got. And I hope this has been an equally enlightening learning opportunity for you. So now you have your model, not specifically this one. I'm going to be fixing this one up before I actually publish it. But to export it to other file types, just go to File, Export Model, choose your type down here, save it where you'd like, call it what you'd like, and you're good. I hope this has been a helpful tutorial. I'm Brittany Johnson, just a student at Carleton College, and this is just what I've learned on my own experimenting with Agisoft Photoscan. Have a good morning, day, evening, wherever you are, and I'll see you again later.